He wasn't supposed to be sold like this. Not after everything his father had done. Not after everything the dog had seen. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And if you believe no loyal soul should ever be left behind, stay with this story, because what happened that evening didn't just change a boy's life. It rewrote what it means to keep a promise. The wind moved slow across the parking lot, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and cold asphalt, the kind that clings to your clothes long after you leave. It was just past 5:30 p.m., the sun hanging low over a row of flickering streetlights that hadn't fully decided whether to wake or sleep. Cars rolled in and out without stopping, tires crunching over gravel, engines humming like distant thoughts no one wanted to finish. And there, near the far edge of the lot where the shadows stretched longest, stood a boy. 10 years old, maybe 11 if you looked close enough. Thin jacket zipped all the way to his chin, sleeves just a little too short. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something quieter. In his left hand, he held a piece of cardboard, edges bent and softened from being gripped too tightly. The words were written in black marker, uneven, like each letter had been fought for. "Please, sir, by my dad's police dog." Beside him sat the dog, a German shepherd, large, steady, his coat a blend of sable and shadow, the kind of animal that didn't belong in a place like this. His posture was straight, disciplined even in stillness, ears alert, eyes scanning every passing face with a quiet intensity that spoke of training, of purpose. But beneath that, there was something else, something heavier. He didn't bark. He didn't move unless the boy moved. He simply stayed, like he had been told once, a long time ago, to never leave his partner behind. The boy, Ethan Cole, shifted his weight from one foot to the other as a pickup truck slowed nearby. The window rolled down halfway. A man leaned out, glanced at the sign, then at the dog. "How much?" he asked, voice flat, casual, like he was pricing a used tool. Ethan swallowed. His fingers tightened around the cardboard. I don't. No, sir." The man frowned, shook his head, and drove off before the boy could say anything else. The sound of the engine faded quickly, swallowed by the open space. Ethan didn't chase. He didn't call out. He just stood there, eyes dropping to the ground for a moment before lifting again, searching for the next car, the next chance, the next maybe. The dog pressed closer, just slightly, his shoulder brushing against Ethan's leg. Not enough to be noticed by anyone else. But enough. Always enough. A gust of wind swept through, colder now, carrying with it the distant echo of a siren somewhere across town. Ethan's breath caught for half a second. Not fear. Memory. He glanced down at the dog. "It's okay, Rex," he whispered, voice barely audible. "We'll find someone." Rex didn't respond with sound. He never did. But his eyes shifted, locking onto Ethan's face with a focus that felt almost human, as if he understood every word, as if he remembered something Ethan couldn't fully carry on his own. Another car pulled in, this one slower, older. The headlights flickered once before steadying, casting a pale wash of light across the boy and the dog. The engine idled for a moment. Then the driver's door opened. Boots hit the ground. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of step that belonged to someone who had spent years walking into places others avoided. The man didn't speak right away. He stood there, taking in the scene, the sign, the boy, the dog. His gaze lingered on Rex a second longer than expected. Not with curiosity, with recognition. Rex noticed it too. His ears twitched, just once. His body shifted forward slightly, not in aggression, not in fear. In awareness. The man stepped closer, the gravel crunching under each footfall. The light caught his face now. Early 40s, maybe, clean cut, but worn at the edges, the kind of look that comes from long nights and decisions that don't leave easily. He crouched down slowly, not reaching out, not rushing, just lowering himself to the dog's level. Rex didn't move away. He didn't lean in either. He simply watched. The man exhaled quietly, almost like a memory had just passed through him. "That's not just any dog, is it?" he said. Softly. Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "He was my dad's." The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been for something so simple. The man nodded once, eyes still on Rex. "Police K9?" Ethan nodded again, this time slower. "Yes, sir." The man's hand hovered for a second before gently resting against Rex's shoulder. Not testing, not claiming, just acknowledging. Rex didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into it. Barely, but enough to say something without sound. Something old. Something remembered. The man's expression shifted, just slightly. A line softening. A thought forming. He looked back up at Ethan, then at the sign in his hands. The cardboard shook again, just a little. You trying to sell him? The man asked. Ethan's throat tightened. He nodded, eyes fixed somewhere just below the man's gaze. Yes, sir. A pause. Not long, but long enough to matter. The kind of silence where something unseen begins to change direction. The man glanced back at Rex, then down at the ground, then back at the boy. And for a moment, the entire parking lot seemed to hold its breath. Because what he would do next wasn't something money could explain. The man did not reach for his wallet. Not yet. Instead, he stayed crouched there beside Rex, his hand still resting lightly against the dog's shoulder, as if he was trying to remember something through touch alone. The parking lot hummed around them, distant engines, a shopping cart rattling somewhere in the wind. But in that small pocket of space, everything felt quieter. Slower. The kind of quiet that carries weight. Ethan shifted his feet again, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. His fingers tightened on the cardboard sign, the edges pressing into his skin. His name is Rex, he said finally, voice low, careful. The man nodded once, eyes still studying the dog. Yeah, he murmured, almost to himself. I figured. Rex's ears flicked at the sound of his name, but he did not break his posture. He simply watched the man with a steady gaze, searching, measuring, like he was trying to place a scent that did not quite belong to this moment. The man leaned back slightly on his heels, exhaling. Through his nose. How long have you had him? Ethan hesitated. Since my dad brought him home. About 3 years. The words came out slower now, like each one had to pass through something heavy before it could be spoken. The man's jaw tightened just a fraction. Your dad worked K9? Ethan nodded. Yes, sir. He was a handler. Rex was his partner. That word hung there for a second. Partner. Not pet. Not dog. Something equal. Something earned. The man's eyes softened, but only slightly. He glanced down at Rex again, and this time there was no question in his expression. Only recognition. He still listens, the man said quietly. You can see it in the way he holds himself. Ethan looked down at Rex, then back up. He does not listen to anyone else, he admitted. Not really. A faint breeze passed through again, colder now as the sun dipped lower behind the buildings. The light shifted, casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement like lines being drawn without explanation. The man stood slowly, brushing his hands against his jeans, but his attention never fully left the dog. Why are you selling him? He asked. No accusation. Just a question that needed an honest answer. Ethan swallowed hard. For a moment, it looked like he might not respond. His eyes dropped to the ground, tracing a crack in the asphalt like it could give him something to hold on to. We cannot keep him, he said finally. My mom, she says we cannot afford it. The food, the training, the vet, it is too much. His voice faltered on the last words, not because they were complicated, but because they were true. The man nodded slowly, absorbing it without interrupting. And nobody else in your family can take him? Ethan shook his head. No, sir. A pause settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with things that did not need to be said out loud. The man glanced around the parking lot, at the passing cars, the people who walked by without stopping, without seeing. Then he looked back at Ethan. You been out here long? Since after school, Ethan answered. About 3 hours. The man's brow furrowed slightly. Anyone make an offer? Ethan gave a small, almost invisible shake of his head. Some people asked, but he did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. The man understood. People saw a price. Not a story. Not a bond. Just a number. Rex shifted then, just a step forward, closing the small distance between himself and the man. It was subtle, but deliberate. His nose lifted slightly, drawing in the man's scent, his body relaxing by a fraction that would have gone unnoticed by anyone who did not know what to look for. The man noticed. His hand moved again, this time resting more firmly along Rex's neck, fingers brushing through the thick fur. Hey, buddy, he said softly. You remember things, do not you? Rex's tail gave the smallest movement. Not a wag, just a quiet acknowledgement. Ethan watched them both, something flickering in his expression. Hope, maybe, or fear of it. The man straightened fully now, reaching into his back pocket. For a second, Ethan's breath caught. This was it. The moment everything would change. The man pulled out his wallet, opened it slowly, then paused. His gaze shifted from the bills inside, back to Ethan, then to Rex, then back again. Something in his expression shifted. Not doubt. Something deeper. A decision forming that did not follow the path Ethan expected. He closed the wallet. Not abruptly. Just deliberately. Ethan blinked, confusion rising quickly. "Sir," he said, unsure. The man slipped the wallet back into his pocket and took a small step closer. "What is your dad's name?" he asked. The question came out calm, steady, but it carried something underneath it. Ethan straightened slightly. "Sergeant Michael Cole." The name landed like a stone in still water. The man's eyes changed instantly. Not wide, not shocked, just still, like something inside him had just stopped moving. For a long second, he said nothing at all. The wind passed again, lifting the edge of Ethan's cardboard sign. The words bent slightly in the fading light. The man's jaw tightened, and he looked down at Rex one more time. Then back at Ethan. "Michael Cole," he repeated quietly. "Yeah." His voice was softer now. Different. Like the name meant something. Like it reached further back than this parking lot. Further than this moment. Ethan noticed it. You knew him?" he asked, hesitant. The man did not answer right away. Instead, he looked out across the lot, past the cars, past the lights, like he was seeing something else entirely. Then he exhaled slowly and brought his eyes back to the boy. "Yeah," he said. "I did." Rex stepped closer again, pressing lightly against Ethan's side, his gaze never leaving the man. The air between them shifted, almost imperceptibly, like something unseen had just aligned. And for the first time since Ethan had stepped into that parking lot, it did not feel like he was standing there alone. The name did not fade after it was spoken. It stayed there, suspended in the cooling air, like something that refused to be forgotten. Officer Daniel Hayes lowered his gaze for a moment, not out of uncertainty, but out of respect, the kind that does not need to be explained. His fingers brushed once more along Rex's fur, slower now, as if tracing a memory instead of a surface. "Your dad," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. He was the kind of man who never left a shift unfinished, even when everyone else clocked out. Ethan listened, his grip on the cardboard loosening slightly, his shoulders drawing in as if bracing for something he did not fully understand. "You worked with him?" Ethan asked. Daniel nodded once. "Different units. Same calls sometimes. Same streets." His eyes lifted, meeting Ethan's now, steady but softened by something deeper. "He talked about you." The boy blinked, caught off guard. "He did." Daniel gave a faint, almost invisible smile. "Every chance he got." The wind moved again, quieter this time, carrying with it the distant hum of traffic blending into the early evening. The streetlights flickered fully alive now, casting a pale amber glow across the lot, outlining the three of them in soft, fading light. Rex shifted his weight, stepping slightly forward, his head tilting just enough to study Daniel's face more closely. There was no tension in him now, only attention, recognition settling in slowly, like a scent finally placed. Daniel noticed the change. His hand lifted, resting gently against Rex's cheek, his thumb brushing along the line of his jaw. "Yeah," he murmured. "You remember, do not you?" Rex exhaled softly, a quiet sound that barely carried, but it was enough. Enough to say yes. Ethan watched the exchange, something in his chest tightening and easing at the same time. "He has not done that with anyone," he said, voice low, almost surprised. Daniel nodded. "That is because he is not just trained. He is bonded." He glanced back at Ethan. Dogs like Rex do not forget their people, not the ones who mattered. Ethan looked down at Rex, his eyes lingering on the familiar lines of the dog's face, the way his ears stayed alert even in calm, the way he never drifted too far. "He still waits by the door sometimes," Ethan admitted quietly. "Like he thinks my dad is coming back." The words hung heavier than anything else that had been said. Daniel's expression shifted again, the faintest tightening around his eyes, not from discomfort, but from understanding. "That is not waiting," he said gently. "That is remembering." A car passed behind them, headlights sweeping briefly across the scene before disappearing into the road beyond. For a second, everything brightened, then dimmed again, like a heartbeat. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket this time, not for his wallet, but for something smaller. He pulled out a worn leather badge holder, flipping it open just enough for Ethan to see the shield inside. The metal caught the light, dull but steady. "I am still on the job," Daniel said. "Not K9 anymore. But I know what it takes to keep one like him going." Ethan's eyes moved from the badge to Daniel's face, searching for something he could trust. "Then you know I cannot do it," he said, voice trembling just slightly. "I tried. I really did." Daniel nodded, no judgment in his gaze. "I believe you." Rex leaned closer into Ethan now, pressing his side firmly against the boy's leg, grounding him without a word. Ethan's hand dropped from the cardboard sign, fingers finding the familiar place behind Rex's ear, rubbing gently like he had done 1,000 times before. "I do not want him to go," Ethan whispered. Daniel stepped closer, closing the distance not as a buyer, but as something else entirely. "Then why are you trying to sell him?" Ethan swallowed, his eyes fixed on the ground again. "Because if I do not, we lose everything else." The truth landed between them, simple and immovable. Daniel looked down, exhaling slowly, his gaze tracing the cracks in the pavement as if searching for a line that could be followed. Then he looked back up, his expression different now, not uncertain, decided. "What if you did not have to choose?" he asked. Ethan frowned slightly, confusion rising again. "What do you mean?" Daniel did not answer right away. Instead, he crouched once more, this time closer to both of them. He reached out, not to Rex alone, but placing one hand lightly on Ethan's shoulder, steady and warm. The kind of touch that did not demand anything, only offered presence. Rex did not move away. He stayed exactly where he was, eyes moving between them, alert to something shifting beneath the surface. Daniel's voice lowered, softer now, but carrying more weight than before. "Your dad saved my life once," he said. Ethan's head lifted instantly, eyes wide. "He did." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, on a call that went sideways faster than anyone expected. He and Rex were the reason I walked out of it." Rex's ears perked at the sound of his name again, his posture straightening just slightly, like a soldier hearing a familiar command. Daniel's gaze lingered on him for a moment, then returned to Ethan. "I never got the chance to pay him back," he continued. "Not the way I should have." The air seemed to still again, like the world was waiting to see what would come next. Ethan's breath slowed, his fingers tightening once more in Rex's fur. "You do not owe us anything," he said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "That is not how this works." He stood slowly, his hand leaving Ethan's shoulder, but not the connection. "Sometimes, the only way to honor someone is to take care of what they left behind." Ethan looked up at him, uncertainty and something else mixing in his expression. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar. Daniel met his gaze, steady and certain now. "I am not here to take him away from you," he said. "I am here because your dad trusted this dog with his life. And now, I think he is asking me to do the same for both of you." Rex stepped forward then, placing himself squarely between them, his body aligned with Ethan's, but his attention fixed on Daniel. Not as a barrier, as a bridge. And in that quiet, unspoken moment, something shifted that no one else in that parking lot could see. Not a sale, not a transaction, something else entirely. Something that felt a lot like the beginning of a promise being kept. The word promise did not need to be spoken again. It lingered in the air anyway, carried in the stillness between them, settling somewhere deeper than sound. Ethan stood there, his small hand still resting against Rex's fur, as if letting go for even a second might break whatever fragile thread had just been woven. The parking lot had grown quieter now. Fewer cars, fewer voices. Just the low hum of distant traffic and the soft buzz of overhead lights flickering against the coming night. Daniel remained where he stood, not rushing, not pressing, giving the moment space to breathe. He had learned that some decisions could not be forced. They had to be allowed to arrive on their own. Ethan shifted slightly, his eyes searching Daniel's face again, trying to understand what was being offered without it being fully said. If you are not taking him," Ethan began slowly, "then what happens now?" His voice carried both hope and hesitation, like someone stepping onto ground they were not sure would hold. Daniel exhaled quietly, glancing once toward the road, then back to the boy. "Now we figure out what your dad would have wanted," he said. Rex's ears lifted at the sound of that, his body still, attentive. Ethan frowned slightly. "He would not want Rex to go to someone who treats him like just a dog," he said. The words came out firmer this time, more certain. Daniel nodded. You are right. He took a small step closer, closing the last bit of distance so they were no longer separated by uncertainty. And he would not want you standing out here alone, trying to carry something this big by yourself. Ethan looked down at the ground again, the truth of that landing harder than anything else. His fingers curled slightly into Rex's coat, holding on without realizing it. Daniel noticed. He always noticed the small things, the ones people did not say out loud. Where is your mom? Daniel asked gently. Ethan hesitated. At home. She is working late. Does she know you are out here? Another pause. Ethan shook his head. No, sir. Daniel nodded once, not surprised, just acknowledging it. All right, he said softly. Then the first thing we do is make sure you get home safe. Ethan looked up quickly, a flicker of worry crossing his face. And Rex? Daniel did not answer with words right away. Instead, he crouched again, bringing himself level with both of them. He reached out, this time placing one hand lightly over Ethan's where it rested on Rex. Not taking it away, just covering it, steadying it. Rex goes wherever you go, he said simply. The words settled into Ethan's chest like something warm, something solid, something he had not felt in a while. But, Ethan started, uncertainty returning. We still cannot keep him. Daniel gave a small, understanding nod. Maybe not the way things are right now, he said. But there are other ways to solve a problem than giving something away. Ethan blinked, trying to follow. Like what? Daniel stood again, his movements calm, deliberate, like making sure you are not trying to solve it alone. He reached into his pocket once more, this time pulling out a phone. The screen lit his face softly as he scrolled, searching for a contact. Rex watched him closely, his body relaxed now, but alert, like he was tracking something important without fully understanding it. Ethan shifted his weight, his eyes moving between Daniel and the phone. Who are you calling? He asked. Daniel paused for a second before answering. Someone who owes your dad just as much as I do. The call rang once, twice. Then a voice answered on the other end, low and steady. Daniel stepped a few feet away, speaking quietly, his tone respectful but direct. Ethan could not hear the words, only the rhythm of them, the way Daniel's voice carried weight even in a whisper. Rex remained by Ethan's side, his head slightly lowered, ears still tuned to every shift. In sound, every change in the air. After a minute, Daniel ended the call and returned, slipping the phone back into his pocket. His expression had changed again. Not tense, not uncertain, just resolved. All right, he said. We are going to take a drive. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. A drive? Daniel nodded. About 15 minutes from here. There is someone I want you to meet. Ethan hesitated, his gaze flicking down to Rex, then back up. Is it safe? The question was quiet, but it carried everything a 10-year-old could not fully explain. Daniel met his eyes without hesitation. I would not ask you to go if it was not, he said. Rex stepped forward then, pressing gently against Ethan's leg again, grounding him the same way he had done all evening. Ethan took a slow breath, his hand tightening once more in the dog's fur. Then, after a moment, he nodded. Okay. Daniel gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Good. He turned slightly, gesturing toward his truck parked a short distance away, its silhouette dark against the fading light. Come on. Ethan bent down briefly, picking up the cardboard sign. He looked at it for a second, the words now feeling heavier than before. Then, without saying anything, he folded it in half and tucked it under his arm. Not thrown away, just set aside. For now. Rex moved with him instantly, staying close, his body aligned with the boys as if nothing in the world could pull them apart. Daniel watched them for a moment, something quiet passing through his expression, something that looked a lot like respect. Then he turned and walked toward the truck, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. Behind him, Ethan followed, step by step, with Rex at his side. And as they crossed that parking lot together, something that had started as a goodbye slowly began to feel like something else entirely. Not an ending. Not yet. Something closer to a door opening in a place they had not known to look. The truck door opened with a low, familiar creak, the kind that came from years of use rather than neglect. Daniel reached across the seat and pushed it wider, giving Ethan space without rushing him. The interior smelled faintly of worn leather and something cleaner beneath it, like soap that had long since faded into memory. Ethan paused just for a second before stepping up, his hand still resting on Rex, as if the motion had to be shared. Rex followed without hesitation, climbing in with practiced ease, his body settling on the floorboard beside Ethan's legs, close enough to feel every shift in the boy's breathing. Daniel closed the door gently, circling around to the driver's side, his boots scraping softly against the gravel. When he slid into his seat, he did not start the engine right away. Instead, he sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes forward but unfocused, as if giving the silence one last chance to say what words could not. Then, with a quiet turn of the key, the engine came to life, low and steady. The headlights cut through the dim parking lot, stretching out across the asphalt like a path waiting to be followed. They pulled out slowly, tires crunching over the uneven ground, merging onto the road without hurry. The city moved around them in quiet layers. Streetlights glowing amber, storefronts reflecting faintly in the glass. A few people walking with their heads down, carrying their own stories, unaware of the one passing beside them. Inside the truck, the air was still. Ethan sat with his shoulders slightly hunched, the folded cardboard sign resting on his lap, his fingers tracing its edge without thinking. Rex stayed pressed against him, his head low but alert, ears catching every sound, every shift in tone, every small movement that might matter. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the center console. His posture was relaxed, but there was intention in every motion, the kind that came from years of knowing when something needed to be steady more than fast. After a few minutes, he spoke, his voice low enough not to disturb the quiet but clear enough to reach. "Your dad used to say something," he began. Ethan looked up slightly, his attention sharpening. "What?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road, a faint reflection of passing lights moving across his face. "He said a good dog does not just follow commands. He follows your heart, even when you do not know where it is going." Ethan's gaze dropped to Rex, his hand moving instinctively to rest on the dog's neck. Rex did not move, but his breathing shifted, slower now, more even, as if the words had settled into him too. "He used to say that," Ethan whispered. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah, he did." The road curved gently, leading them away from the busier streets into a quieter part of town. The buildings grew smaller, spaced farther apart, the lights softer, less demanding. Trees lined the sidewalks now, their branches moving slightly in the evening breeze, casting shadows that flickered across the windshield like something alive. Ethan leaned back a little in his seat, his grip on the cardboard loosening. "Where are we going?" he asked. Daniel glanced at him briefly, then back to the road. "A place your dad trusted," he said. "Not because it was easy, because it was right." Ethan did not fully understand, but he nodded anyway, something in Daniel's voice telling him that understanding would come later. Rex shifted slightly, lifting his head just enough to look out the window, his reflection faint in the glass, eyes steady, watchful. The truck slowed as they turned onto a narrower street, the pavement smoother here, the houses set back with small yards and quiet porches. A single street lamp flickered at the corner, its light pooling softly over the road. Daniel eased the truck to a stop in front of a modest building set slightly apart from the others. It was not large, not imposing, but there was something about it that felt grounded, like it had stood through more than time alone. A small sign near the entrance caught the light just enough to be read. Canine Support and Rehabilitation Center. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowing. "What is this place?" he asked. Daniel turned off the engine, the sudden quiet settling in around them like a held breath. He looked at Ethan fully now, his expression calm but certain. "It is where dogs like Rex come when they need a second chapter," he said. Ethan's fingers tightened again, just slightly. "You mean when they are done?" The question carried a quiet fear, the kind that did not want to be confirmed. Daniel shook his head gently. "No," he said. "When they are not done, just not in the same way." Rex's ears lifted at the tone of his voice, his body shifting forward just a fraction, as if something in him recognized the place before his eyes could confirm it. Daniel opened his door, stepping out into the cool evening air, then walked around to Ethan's side, opening it without a word. Ethan climbed down slowly, Rex following close behind, his posture changing the moment his paws touched the ground. He stood taller now, more alert, his gaze moving across the building, taking in the scents, the sounds, the quiet energy that lived there. The door to the building opened before Daniel could knock. A woman stepped out, her presence calm but steady, her eyes taking in the scene with quiet understanding. She looked first at Daniel, then at Ethan, then at Rex. And when her gaze settled on the dog, something in her expression softened, like she had just recognized a story she already knew. Daniel gave a small nod. "I told you I would bring them," he said. The woman stepped aside, holding the door open. "Then do not keep them waiting," she replied softly. Ethan hesitated for a brief second, his hand finding Rex's fur again, grounding himself in the only constant he had left. Then, with a quiet breath, he stepped forward. Rex moved with him instantly, not a step behind, not a step ahead, exactly beside him. And as they crossed the threshold together, the night behind them seemed to pause, just for a moment, as if it, too, understood that something had just changed in a way that could not be undone. The warmth inside the building did not come from heat alone. It came from something quieter, something that settled into the bones without asking permission. As Ethan stepped across the threshold, the scent changed first. No longer cold asphalt and distant exhaust, but clean air touched with something softer, like soap and worn blankets and time spent healing. The lights inside were gentle, not harsh, casting a steady glow across polished floors and walls lined with framed photographs. Dogs and handlers, old and new, moments captured in stillness, each one carrying a story that did not need words. Rex paused just inside the doorway, his body still, his nose lifting slightly as he took in the space. His ears moved once, then again, adjusting to the quiet rhythm of the place. It was not unfamiliar. Not entirely. There was something here that echoed a life he had known before, something structured, something calm, something that spoke in silence instead of commands. Ethan felt it too, though he could not name it. His hand stayed on Rex, fingers curled gently into the thick fur, grounding himself in the only thing that had remained constant. The woman who had opened the door stepped forward, her movements measured, her presence steady in a way that did not need to be announced. She was somewhere in her early 50s, her hair pulled back simply, her posture straight but not rigid. Her eyes moved over Ethan first, soft but observant, then to Rex, where they lingered just a moment longer. Not with curiosity, with recognition. "You must be Ethan," she said, her voice calm, carrying a quiet warmth that felt practiced but not forced. Ethan nodded slightly, unsure what to say. "Yes, ma'am." She gave a small nod in return. "I am Margaret." No title, no explanation, just a name. Like the rest would speak for itself. Daniel stepped in behind them, closing the door gently, sealing the night outside. The sound was soft, but it marked a shift. A line crossed. Margaret's gaze flicked briefly to him, and something unspoken passed between them, something built on familiarity and trust. "You were right to bring them," she said quietly. Daniel inclined his head once. "I figured you would see it." Margaret turned her attention back to Rex, taking a slow step closer, but stopping just outside his space. She did not reach for him. She did not call to him. She simply stood there, letting him decide. Rex watched her carefully, his body steady, his breathing even. Then, after a moment, he took a single step forward. Not much, just enough. Margaret's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "He still carries himself like he is on duty," she said. Daniel nodded. He never really left it. Ethan looked between them, his confusion. Returning. "What is this place really?" he asked. Margaret turned slightly, gesturing gently toward the hallway beyond. "It is a place where dogs like Rex learn how to live again," she said. "Not as tools, not as assignments, but as something more human than we sometimes allow them to be." Ethan frowned slightly, trying to understand. "He is already good," he said quietly. Margaret smiled, not correcting him, just adding to what he already believed. "Yes," she said, "he is. But being good and being at peace are not always the same thing." The words settled into the room, into the quiet spaces between breaths. Rex shifted again, stepping closer to Ethan, his shoulder pressing lightly against the boy's leg. Not out of fear, out of instinct, staying where he belonged. Daniel watched them both, his gaze steady, his presence grounded in something that did not waver. "This place helps with that," he said. "For dogs, and sometimes for the people connected to them." Ethan looked down at Rex again, his fingers moving slowly along the dog's neck. "Will he have to stay here?" he asked, the question carrying more weight than it seemed. Margaret did not answer immediately. Instead, She crouched slightly, bringing herself closer to Ethan's level without stepping into Rex's space. That depends, she said gently, on what you need, and on what he needs. Sometimes those two things are the same. Sometimes they take a little time to meet in the middle. Ethan's grip tightened just a little. I do not want to leave him. Margaret nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. Then we do not start there, she said. She stood again, turning slightly as a soft sound echoed from deeper inside the building. A distant bark. Not sharp, not urgent, just a sound that belonged. Rex's ears lifted instantly, his posture shifting, alert but not tense. He listened, measured, then relaxed again, just a fraction. Margaret noticed. He hears them, she said. Others like him. Daniel glanced down the hallway, then back to Ethan. You want to see? He asked. Ethan hesitated for only a second before nodding. Okay. Margaret stepped aside, leading them gently forward. The hallway opened into a larger room, one that felt less like a facility and more like a quiet sanctuary. A few dogs rested on padded beds, some alone, some near handlers who sat with them in silence. No shouting, no commands, just presence, just patience. Rex stepped in slowly, his movements careful, his eyes scanning each corner, each shadow, each shape. He did not pull. He did not rush. He observed, learned, remembered. Ethan stayed close, his hand never leaving Rex, even as his eyes moved around the room, taking in something he had never seen before. Not a place for endings, a place for something else. Margaret stopped near the center, turning back toward them. No one here is being taken away, she said quietly. They are being given time. And sometimes, time is the one thing that changes everything. Daniel stood just behind Ethan, his presence steady, not pushing forward, not pulling back. Just there. And as Rex slowly lowered himself to sit beside Ethan, his body finally easing into the space, something inside the room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be felt. Like a breath finally released after being held too long. Time did not rush inside that room. It stretched, softened, unfolded in quiet layers that did not demand attention, but slowly reshaped everything they touched. Ethan stood there with Rex beside him, his hand still resting against the dog's neck, but his grip had changed. It was no longer holding on out of fear. It was something gentler now, something steadier, like he was beginning to understand that letting go did not always mean losing. Across the room, one of the older dogs shifted on a padded bed, lifting its head just enough to acknowledge Rex's presence before settling again. There was no tension, no challenge, just recognition, a shared language spoken without sound. Rex noticed it. His ears flicked once, his body remaining calm, but his gaze softened in a way Ethan had not seen before. Not alert, not guarding, just aware. Margaret watched quietly from a few steps away, her hands folded loosely in front of her, her eyes moving between the boy and the dog. He is listening, she said softly. Ethan glanced up. To what? Margaret tilted her head slightly, considering the question. To the absence of urgency, she replied. To a place where nothing is being asked of him except to exist. Ethan looked back down at Rex, his brow furrowing just a little. He has always had something to do, he said. Even at home. My dad would train him, run drills, keep him busy. Daniel stepped forward slightly, his voice low but steady. That is how they are built, he said. But it is not all they are. Rex shifted again, slowly lowering himself from a sit to a resting position beside Ethan, his body stretching out just enough to release a tension that had been carried too long. His head remained lifted, alert, but no longer rigid. Ethan felt it immediately. The change was subtle, but it was there. He has not done that in a while, Ethan murmured. Margaret gave a small nod. Because he has not had permission to, she said. Until now. The words settled quietly, but they carried weight. Permission, not command, not training. Something else, something deeper. Ethan knelt slowly beside Rex, his hand moving along the dog's side, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. For the first time since the parking lot, it was not uneven, not tight, just calm. Will he forget my dad? Ethan asked suddenly, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Margaret's expression softened, and she stepped closer, lowering herself to one knee across from him. No, she said gently. Dogs like Rex do not forget. They carry those bonds in ways we cannot always see. Ethan swallowed, his fingers tightening slightly in Rex's fur. Then what changes? He asked. Margaret looked at Rex, then back at Ethan. The weight of it, she said. Memory does not have to hurt in order to be real. Daniel watched them both, his jaw set in a quiet line, not from tension, but from understanding. He had seen it before. The way loss could shape itself into something that stayed too long, too heavy, until someone showed you how to carry it differently. Rex exhaled slowly, his head lowering just enough to rest against Ethan's knee. The contact was light, but intentional. Ethan's breath caught for a moment, then steadied. He is tired, Ethan said softly. Margaret nodded. He has been holding the line for a long time, she replied. Longer than he was meant to. The room remained still around them, the other dogs resting, the quiet hum of the building wrapping everything in a sense of safety that did not need to be explained. Daniel stepped closer now, stopping just behind Ethan. There is something else you should know, he said. Ethan looked up slightly. What? Daniel hesitated for just a second, not because he was unsure, but because he understood the weight of what he was about to say. Your dad made arrangements, he said. Ethan blinked. Arrangements? Margaret's eyes shifted to Daniel, a silent acknowledgement passing between them before she spoke. He came here, she said gently. Not long before. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Ethan's expression changed instantly, confusion mixing with something sharper. He came here? What? Daniel crouched down beside him, his voice lowering, steady and careful. Because he knew what could happen in this line of work, he said. And he did not want you or Rex to be left without a path. Ethan's heart seemed to pause for a second, the world narrowing to the words he was trying to understand. What does that mean? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Margaret reached out then, not touching him, but placing her hand gently on the floor between them, offering presence instead of pressure. It means he trusted us, she said, to help you both find what comes next. Rex's ears lifted slightly at the tone of her voice, his eyes opening a fraction more, watching, listening, present in a way that felt different from before. Not guarding, not waiting, just there. Ethan looked down at him, then back at Daniel, his thoughts racing but beginning to form something clearer. So he knew. Daniel nodded once. He hoped, he corrected softly. And he planned for that hope. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something shifting, something realigning in a way that could not be rushed. Ethan's hand moved slowly along Rex's fur again, but this time there was no desperation in it. No fear of losing. Just connection. Just presence. And for the first time since everything had changed, Ethan did not feel like he was standing at the edge of something ending. He felt like he was standing at the beginning of something he had not yet learned how to name. The word hope did not fade after it was spoken. It settled into Ethan's chest in a way that felt unfamiliar, like something he had not allowed himself to carry for a long time. He stayed there on his knees beside Rex, his hand resting gently along the dog's side, feeling each steady breath rise and fall as if it were anchoring him to something real. The room remained quiet around them, but it was no longer the kind of silence that pressed down. It was the kind that held space, the kind that allowed things to surface without fear of breaking. Ethan looked up slowly, his eyes moving between Margaret and Daniel, searching for something solid to stand on. What did he ask you to do? He said, his voice careful, like the answer might change everything. Margaret and Daniel exchanged a brief glance, not uncertain, but respectful of the moment. Then Margaret spoke, her tone soft but clear. He asked us to make sure Rex would not be placed somewhere he would be misunderstood, she said. And he asked that you would not be left to figure this out alone. Ethan swallowed, the words settling deeper than he expected. So this place, it was his idea? Daniel nodded slowly. Part of it, he said. He knew Rex would need time. And he knew you would need it too. Ethan's fingers curled slightly into Rex's fur again, not tightly this time, just enough to feel the warmth there. But I still do not understand, he admitted. If Rex stays here, where do I go? The question did not come from fear this time. It came from honesty, from a place that was beginning to trust enough to ask. Daniel stepped forward, lowering himself so he was at Ethan's level again, his presence steady and grounded. You go where you are supposed to go, he said. Home, school, your life. But you do not lose him in the process. Ethan frowned slightly, trying to follow. How does that work? Margaret shifted closer, her voice carrying a quiet reassurance. It works. Because this is not a place where things are taken away, she said. It is a place where they are strengthened until they can return in a way that lasts. Rex lifted his head slightly at her voice, his eyes moving between them, alert but calm. Ethan looked at him, then back at Margaret. So he comes back, he asked. Margaret smiled gently. If that is what is right for both of you, she said. Yes. The answer did not come with certainty. It came with truth. And somehow, that felt more real. Ethan let out a slow breath, his shoulders lowering just a fraction. And if I cannot wait? He asked quietly. Daniel's expression softened, but his voice remained steady. Then we find a way that does not break either of you, he said. Because your dad did not raise you to walk away from something that matters. He taught you how to stand by it, even when it is hard. The words landed differently this time. Not as pressure, as guidance. Ethan's eyes shifted down again, watching Rex as the dog slowly adjusted his position, settling more fully against the floor, his body no longer carrying the same edge of readiness. He is different here, Ethan said. He is calmer. Margaret nodded. Because he does not have to choose between being a partner and being himself, she replied. Here, he can be both. A soft sound echoed from the far side of the room, another dog shifting, its handler speaking in a low, soothing tone. Rex's ears flicked toward it, but he did not rise. He simply listened, then returned his focus to Ethan. The connection between them had not weakened. It had changed, grown quieter, stronger in a way that did not need constant reinforcement. Ethan noticed it. He is not pulling, he said softly. He always pulls when we are somewhere new. Daniel gave a small nod. That is because he is not trying to protect you from this place, he said. He trusts it. Ethan looked up again, his eyes searching Daniel's face. And you? He asked. Do you trust it? Daniel did not hesitate. I trust the man who trusted it, he said. And that is enough for me. The answer settled into Ethan in a way nothing else had. Not because it solved everything, but because it gave him something to stand on. Something connected to his father that was still here, still guiding him in ways he had not expected. Margaret rose slowly, giving them space again, her presence shifting back into the quiet rhythm of the room. You do not have to decide anything tonight, she said. This is not that kind of place. Ethan nodded slowly, the pressure in his chest easing just a little more. Can I stay with him for a bit? He asked. Margaret's expression softened. Of course, she said. Daniel stepped back as well, his role not to lead this moment, but to allow it. He watched as Ethan adjusted himself on the floor beside Rex, leaning slightly against the dog's side, not out of exhaustion, but out of something that felt closer to peace. Rex shifted just enough to accommodate him, his head resting gently against Ethan's leg once more. The room continued around them, quiet, steady, unchanged. But within that stillness, something important had shifted. Not in a way that could be seen from the outside. Not in a way that would draw attention. Just enough. Just enough for a boy to realize that holding on did not always mean fighting. And sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was trust the place your father had already chosen for you. The room did not change, but something inside Ethan did. It was not sudden, not dramatic, just a quiet shift, like a door opening somewhere deep inside him that he had not known was locked. He sat there beside Rex, his back resting lightly against the dog's side, his fingers tracing slow patterns through the fur without thinking, without needing to. Time moved differently here. It did not push. It did not pull. It simply allowed. Rex's breathing stayed steady, each inhale and exhale grounding, consistent, like a rhythm Ethan had been searching for without realizing it. Around them, the soft presence of the other dogs and their handlers continued, small movements, quiet voices, the occasional gentle step across the floor. Nothing urgent, nothing demanding, just life continuing in a way that did not hurt. Ethan glanced up after a while, his eyes finding Daniel across the room. He had not moved much, still standing where he had. Stepped back, hands resting loosely at his sides, watching without intruding. Not as an officer, not as someone in charge, just as someone who understood that this moment did not belong to him. Ethan shifted slightly, his voice low when he spoke. How long does it take? Daniel tilted his head just a fraction. For what? Ethan looked down at Rex again, his hand still moving gently along the dog's side. For him to be okay. The question carried weight, but it was no longer sharp. It was softer now, shaped by something closer to patience than fear. Daniel took a slow breath before answering. That depends on what okay means, he said. Ethan frowned slightly. I mean, like before. Daniel's expression changed, just a little, not in disagreement, but in understanding. Before is not always something you go back to, he said quietly. Sometimes it is something you grow into differently. Ethan did not respond right away. He let the words sit, turning them over in his mind like something fragile. Rex shifted again beside him, adjusting his weight, his body relaxing further into the floor. His head turned slightly, his gaze moving toward the far side of the room, where another handler sat quietly with a dog resting its head in their lap. There was no tension in Rex now. No scanning. No need to anticipate. Just presence. Ethan noticed it again, this time more clearly. He is not watching everything, Ethan said softly. He always watches everything. Margaret, who had been standing near the doorway, stepped a little closer, her voice calm as ever. That is because he knows he does not have to right now, she said. Safety changes how a dog carries himself. Ethan nodded slowly, his fingers still moving in small, absent patterns through Rex's coat. I forgot what that looks like, he admitted. The words came out quietly, but they were honest. Daniel's gaze softened, and he took a small step closer, though still giving Ethan space. That happens, he said, when things change fast, when you have to grow up in places you were not ready for. Ethan glanced up at him, something in his expression shifting again. Is that what I am doing? He asked. Daniel met his eyes, steady and certain. Yeah, he said, but you are not doing it alone anymore. The words settled deeper than anything else had so far. Not loud, not overwhelming, just there. Something to hold on to. Ethan looked down again, his hand pausing for a moment on Rex's side before continuing, slower now, more deliberate. If he stays here for a while, he began, his voice hesitant again. Will he still know me? Margaret smiled gently, stepping closer but still respecting the space between them. He already knows you, she said. That does not change because of distance. It is not that kind of bond. Rex shifted his head slightly at the sound of her voice, then turned it just enough to rest more fully against Ethan's leg, his eyes half closed now, but still aware, still present. Ethan let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. He feels different, he said. Margaret nodded. So do you, she replied softly. Ethan looked up at that, surprised. I do. Margaret's expression remained calm, but there was something knowing in it. You are not holding on the same way you were earlier, she said. You are not bracing for something to be taken. You are allowing something to stay. Ethan did not answer right away. He looked down again, considering her words, feeling them more than understanding them. Daniel watched the exchange, his posture unchanged, but something in his stance had shifted. Less guarded, more at ease. The kind of stillness that came when something had gone the way it was supposed to, even if no one had planned it exactly like this. A soft sound echoed again from another part of the room, a low murmur from a handler speaking to their dog, followed by a quiet thump of a tail against a padded bed. Rex's ears flicked once toward it, then settled again. He did not rise. He did not react beyond that. He simply remained. Ethan leaned slightly more against him, not out of exhaustion, but out of comfort. His body no longer tense, no longer waiting for something to go wrong. I think he likes it here, Ethan said after a moment. Daniel gave a small nod. I think he does, he replied. Margaret's voice came again, soft but steady. That does not mean he is choosing this place over you, she said. It means he is finding a way to carry both. Ethan's eyes lifted slowly, meeting hers. Both. Margaret nodded. Who he was with your father, and who he can be with you. The words settled gently, but they carried a quiet truth that did not need to be forced. Ethan looked back down at Rex, his hand resting still now, not moving, just there. Rex responded by shifting slightly closer, his body aligning fully with Ethan's side, his presence solid, unwavering. And in that quiet alignment, something became clear. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. Enough for a boy to understand that losing someone did not mean losing everything they had built. And sometimes, the strongest bond did not break when the world changed. It adapted. It endured. It waited until you were ready to meet it again in a new way. The night outside had settled fully by the time Ethan realized how long he had been sitting there. The soft glow of the lights inside the room remained unchanged, but beyond the windows, the world had grown darker, quieter, as if everything beyond those walls had slowed down to match the rhythm within. Ethan shifted slightly, his legs beginning to feel the stillness, but he did not move away from Rex. Not yet. There was something about this moment that felt too important to interrupt. Rex remained beside him, his body relaxed in a way that was no longer unfamiliar. His breathing stayed steady, his head still resting against Ethan's leg, his presence constant without demanding anything in return. It was different from before. Not less. Just quieter. Daniel stepped closer again, his boots making almost no sound against the floor. He stopped a few feet away, his posture easy but attentive. "We should probably start thinking about heading out," he said gently. Ethan did not respond right away. His hand remained on Rex, his fingers still, as if he was holding on to something he was not ready to release. "Do we have to?" he asked after a moment, his voice low. Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked down at Rex, then back at Ethan, weighing the question not as a rule, but as something that deserved care. "Not in a rush," he said, "but you do need to get home. Your mom is going to be worried." The reminder landed softly, but it was enough. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes dropping again to Rex. "Will he be here tomorrow?" he asked. Margaret, who had been standing quietly near the doorway, stepped forward just enough for her voice to carry. "Yes," she said. "He will be here. And so will we." Ethan let out a small breath, something easing in his chest. "Can I come back?" Margaret's expression softened. "You can come back as often as you need," she replied. "This is not a place that closes its doors to the people who belong here." Ethan nodded again, the answer settling into him like something he could trust. He shifted his weight slightly, preparing to stand, but his hand hesitated on Rex's fur. For a moment, he did not move at all. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned forward just enough to rest his forehead lightly against Rex's head. The contact was brief, quiet, but it carried more than words ever could. Rex responded instantly, lifting his head just enough to meet him, his body remaining grounded, his presence steady. Ethan pulled back after a second, his breath catching slightly, but not breaking. "Not this time." "I will come back," he whispered. Rex's ears flicked once, his eyes opening just enough to meet Ethan's before settling again. Not following, not resisting, just trusting. Ethan stood then, slower than before, but steadier. His hand slipped from Rex's fur, not abruptly, not forced, but naturally, like something that knew it would return. For a second, he looked down at the dog, his expression unreadable except for one thing. It was no longer fear. Daniel watched him carefully, then gave a small nod. "You did good," he said quietly. Ethan glanced up, surprised. "I did." Daniel's voice remained calm. "Yeah," he said. "You made a hard choice without letting it turn into the wrong one." Ethan considered that, his brow furrowing slightly, but there was no confusion in it this time. Just thought. Just understanding beginning to take shape. Margaret stepped closer, her presence gentle but steady. "Would you like to see where he will rest tonight?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Okay." She led them a short distance down the hall, to a quieter room lined with soft bedding and low lighting. It was not a kennel, not a place of separation. It felt more like a space meant for rest, for recovery, for something that needed time rather than confinement. Rex followed calmly, his movements unhurried, his posture still alert but no longer rigid. He stepped into the room without hesitation, his nose lowering briefly as he took in the scent, then lifting again as he chose a spot near the center. Ethan watched him closely, his chest tightening for just a second as Rex settled onto the bed, his body easing into it like it had been waiting for this kind of rest. "He looks comfortable," Ethan said softly. Margaret nodded. "He is," she replied. "And that matters more than anything else right now." Ethan stood there for a moment longer, just watching, just taking it in. Then he gave a small nod, more to himself than anyone else. "Okay," he said. Daniel placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, not guiding, just there. "Ready?" Ethan took one last look at Rex, then nodded again. "Yeah." They turned toward the door, the hallway stretching out ahead of them, quiet and steady. As they walked, Ethan did not look back immediately. Not because he did not want to, but because he did not need to. The connection had not been broken. It had been placed somewhere safe. And for the first time since everything had changed, Ethan did not feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was trusting it to wait. And sometimes, That is what love looks like when it learns how to grow. The night air felt different when Ethan stepped back outside. Cooler, sharper, carrying the quiet hum of a world that had not stopped, even while something inside him had. The door closed softly behind them, and for a brief second, Ethan stood still on the concrete walkway, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, his mind still somewhere inside that room. The faint glow from the windows behind him cast long shadows across the ground, stretching forward like something guiding rather than pulling him back. Daniel moved beside him without urgency, giving him space to take in the moment without breaking it. The sound of distant traffic rolled through the air, steady and indifferent, a reminder that the world kept moving whether you were ready or not. Ethan took a slow breath, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt unfamiliar, not because it was new, but because it had been missing. He glanced back once, just a brief look toward the door, toward where Rex now rested. Not with panic, not with hesitation, just acknowledgement. Then he turned forward again. Daniel watched him quietly, a small shift in his posture marking something important. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, careful not to disturb what had settled. Ethan nodded after a moment. "Yeah," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "I think so." The answer was not perfect. It did not need to be. Daniel gave a small nod in return, accepting it as enough. They walked toward the truck together, their footsteps soft against the pavement, the space between them no longer filled with uncertainty. Ethan climbed in without hesitation this time, settling into the seat with a quiet exhale, his hands resting loosely in his lap. The cardboard sign was still there, folded, edges worn, but it no longer felt like something he had to hold on to. It felt like something that had already done its job. Daniel started the engine, the low rumble filling the silence again, but it did not feel intrusive. It felt grounding. They pulled away from the building slowly, the headlights cutting through the dark street, illuminating the road ahead in steady lines. For a while, neither of them spoke. The city passed by in quiet fragments, streetlights, closed shops, the occasional passing car. Ethan watched it all through the window, his reflection faint in the glass, his expression calmer than it had been hours ago. Not fixed, not fully healed, but no longer breaking. He knew, didn't he? Ethan said suddenly, his voice quiet but clear. Daniel glanced at him briefly. "Your dad?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah." He knew this might happen. That Rex would need this. That I would. Daniel let out a slow breath, his hands steady on the wheel. "Yeah," he said. He knew enough to plan for it. Ethan looked down at his hands, his fingers tracing the edge of the folded cardboard again, but this time without tension. "Why did he not tell me?" he asked. Daniel's expression shifted slightly, not with discomfort, but with understanding. "Because some things are not meant to be understood before you are ready for them," he said. Ethan considered that, his gaze drifting back to the window. The passing lights reflected softly across his face, each one fading as quickly as it appeared. I get it now," he said after a moment. Daniel did not respond right away. He let the words sit, giving them space to become real. "Yeah," he asked finally. Ethan nodded, still looking out at the road. "He was not just taking care of Rex," he said. "He was taking care of me." The truth of it settled between them, quiet but undeniable. Daniel gave a small nod, his grip on the wheel loosening just slightly. "That is what good men do," he said. The truck turned onto a familiar street, the houses closer now, the lights warmer, more personal. Ethan shifted in his seat, sitting up a little straighter, as if something inside him had realigned. "Will you take me back tomorrow?" he asked. Daniel did not hesitate. "Yeah," he said. "I will." Ethan nodded, a small, steady movement that carried more certainty than anything he had said before. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it was no longer the kind of silence that needed to be filled. It was complete on its own. When the truck finally pulled up in front of Ethan's house, the porch light was on, casting a soft glow over the front steps. Ethan looked at it for a moment before reaching for the door handle. He paused, his hand resting there, then turned slightly toward Daniel. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but they carried everything he could not fully express. Daniel met his gaze, his expression steady, grounded. "You do not have to thank me," he said. "Just come back tomorrow." Ethan gave a small nod, then opened the door and stepped out into the night. The air felt different now. Not lighter, just clearer. He closed the door gently behind him and walked toward the house, his steps steady, his shoulders no longer pulled inward. At the door, he paused for a second, his hand resting against the handle. Then he took a breath and stepped inside. Daniel remained in the truck for a moment longer, watching the door close, the porch light casting its quiet glow. Then he exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting forward again. Somewhere behind those walls, a boy had taken his first step into something new. Not because he was forced to, but because he was ready. And sometimes, that is the difference between losing something and learning how to carry it forward. The house was quiet in a way that felt different from before. Not empty, not heavy, just still, like it had been waiting for something to return that had never truly left. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him, the familiar sound echoing faintly through the hallway. The porch light filtered in through the window, casting a warm glow across the floor, stretching toward the living room where shadows rested in corners that no longer felt as deep. He stood there for a moment, his hand still on the doorknob, listening. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant ticking of a clock, the quiet rhythm of a home that had learned how to keep going. His shoes made a soft sound as he stepped forward, moving slowly, not because he was unsure, but because he was noticing things again. The couch where his father used to sit, the chair by the window, the framed photograph on the wall, a man in uniform, standing beside a German shepherd with steady eyes and a posture that matched his own. Ethan paused there, his gaze settling on the image. He had seen it 1,000 times. But tonight, it felt different. Not like something lost. Like something still speaking. He stepped closer, reaching up slightly, his fingers brushing the edge of the frame. "I think I understand now," he whispered. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Somewhere in the quiet, they felt heard. A soft sound came from the hallway behind him, the faint click of a door opening. His mother stepped into the room, her face tired but alert, her eyes immediately finding him. "Ethan," she said, her voice carrying both relief and concern. "Where have you been?" Ethan turned, not startled, not defensive, just present. "I went out," he said simply. She stepped closer, her gaze moving over him, checking for something wrong, something broken. But she did not find it. Instead, she found something she had not seen in days. Calm. Not perfect, but real. "You should have told me," she said softly. "I was worried." Ethan nodded, accepting it without resistance. "I know," he said. Then, after a small pause, he added, "I will next time." The words were steady, not rushed, not forced. She studied him for a moment, something in her expression shifting as she tried to understand what had changed. "Where did you go?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for just a second, not because he did not want to answer, but because he wanted to say it right. "I went to a place Dad trusted," he said. His mother's brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan stepped aside slightly, glancing once more at the photograph before looking back at her. He knew Rex might need help, he said, and he made sure there was somewhere for that. She took a small breath, her eyes softening as the meaning settled in. "You mean a training center?" Ethan shook his head gently. "Not just training," he said. "Something else. Somewhere he can be okay." The room grew quiet again, but it was not tense. His mother stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "And Rex?" she asked. Ethan looked down briefly, then back up, his voice steady. "He is there," he said, "but he is not gone." The distinction mattered, more than he could explain. She nodded slowly, her hand tightening just a fraction, not out of worry, but out of something closer to understanding. "And you?" she asked. "Are you okay?" Ethan thought about it. Not quickly, not automatically. He let the question sit, let it find its place. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am getting there." The answer was not complete, but it was honest. And that was enough. She pulled him into a gentle embrace, not holding too tightly, not overwhelming him, just enough to remind him that he was not alone here either. Ethan leaned into it for a moment, then stepped back, his gaze clearer. "Now, I am going back tomorrow," he said. She looked at him, searching his face. "To see Rex?" He nodded. "Yeah." A small pause passed between them, then she gave a quiet nod. "Okay," she said. No argument. No hesitation. Just trust. Ethan moved past her then, heading toward the kitchen, the familiar space feeling different under his feet. Not because it had changed. Because he had. He reached the counter, setting the folded cardboard sign down gently. He looked at it for a moment, then slid it aside, not throwing it away, just placing it somewhere it no longer needed to be held. The house settled again around them, the quiet now carrying something new. Not absence, not loss, just space. Space for something to return. Outside, the night continued, steady and unchanged. But inside, something had shifted in a way that could not be undone. A boy had walked out of his home carrying the weight of losing everything, and he had returned carrying something else. Not certainty, not answers, but something stronger. The understanding that what mattered most had not been taken from him. It had simply been placed somewhere safe until he was ready to meet it again. Morning arrived quietly, not with urgency, but with a kind of patience that felt earned. The light filtered through Ethan's window in soft lines, stretching across the floor and resting gently against the edge of his bed. For a moment, he lay still, not waking all at once, but returning piece by piece, like someone stepping back into a place that had changed while he was gone. The house was quiet again, but it no longer carried the same weight. It felt open. Ethan sat up slowly, the memory of the night before settling into him not as something distant, but as something still present, still shaping the way he moved. His eyes drifted toward the corner of the room where Rex's bed used to be. Empty now, but not abandoned. Just waiting. He stood, pulling on his jacket, his movements steady, deliberate, as if he already knew where the day was leading him. Downstairs, the kitchen carried the familiar scent of coffee and toast, his mother standing by the counter, her posture softer than it had been in weeks. She looked up as he entered, her eyes meeting his with something quieter than worry. "You are up early," she said. Ethan nodded, reaching for a glass of water, the coolness grounding him. "I am going back," he said simply. She did not ask where. She already knew. Instead, she gave a small nod, turning slightly as if the decision had already been made the night before. "Do you want me to come with you?" she asked. Ethan paused, considering it, not out of hesitation, but out of honesty. Then he shook his head gently. I need to go first," he said. She studied him for a moment, then nodded again. "All right," she replied. "But I will be here when you get back." The words carried no conditions. Just presence. Just trust. Outside, the air felt different in the morning. Cooler, clearer, carrying the faint scent of damp pavement and something new beneath it. Ethan stepped onto the porch, taking a slow breath before moving forward, his step steady as he walked toward the edge of the driveway. The street was quiet, the world still waking up, but he did not feel alone in it. Not anymore. The familiar rumble of an engine approached, and Daniel's truck pulled up just as it had the night before, stopping gently at the curb. Ethan opened the door without hesitation, climbing in with a quiet nod. "Morning," Daniel said. Ethan nodded back. "Morning." There was no need for more. They pulled away from the house, the road stretching out ahead of them, but this time it did not feel uncertain. It felt known. When they arrived, the building looked the same as it had the night before, but in the daylight, it carried something different. Less hidden, more welcoming. Ethan stepped out of the truck, his eyes lifting toward the entrance, his breath steady as he walked forward. The door opened before he reached it. Margaret stood there again, her expression unchanged, calm, grounded, as if she had known he would return. "Good morning, Ethan," she said. He nodded. "Good morning." There was no hesitation in him now, no uncertainty in his step as he crossed the threshold again. Inside, the space felt familiar in a way that had not existed yesterday. Not because it had changed, because he had. His eyes moved immediately toward the room where Rex had rested. His pace quickened slightly, not rushed, just purposeful. And then he saw him. Rex was already awake, sitting near the edge of the room, his posture alert but calm, his gaze shifting toward the doorway the moment Ethan appeared. There was no hesitation, no confusion. Rex stood immediately, his body moving with quiet certainty as he crossed the space between them. Ethan did not run. He did not call out. He simply stood there, letting the moment come to him. Rex stopped just in front of him, his head lifting slightly, his eyes steady, present. And then, without command, without hesitation, Rex stepped forward and pressed his head gently against Ethan's chest. Ethan's breath caught, not in fear, not in uncertainty, but in something deeper, something that did not need to be named. His hands came up instinctively, resting against Rex's shoulders, holding him not as something he might lose, but as something that had already found its way back. Daniel watched from the doorway, his arms resting loosely at his sides, his expression calm but knowing. Margaret stood beside him, her gaze soft, her presence steady. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to, because some moments do not belong to words. Ethan leaned his forehead lightly against Rex's head, closing his eyes for just a second, not to hold on, but to recognize. When he pulled back, there were no tears, no breaking, just something steady in his gaze, something clear. "Hey, partner," he whispered. Rex's ears flicked once, his tail moving gently, not in excitement, but in acknowledgement. And in that quiet exchange, something completed itself. Not an ending, not a return to what had been, but the beginning of something new. Something that did not erase the past, but carried it forward in a way that felt whole. Because sometimes, the things we think we are losing are not leaving us at all. They are simply waiting for us to grow strong enough to meet them again, not as we were, but as who we are becoming. And in that space between loss and return, something remarkable happens. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, just real. The kind of miracle that does not need to be seen to be believed. The kind that lives in the space between a boy and a dog, and a promise that was never broken.